The moment I saw Victoria Sterling's smirk as my laptop screen went black in front of 12 of the most influential venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, I knew my career was either about to end or transform in ways I never imagined. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about power, betrayal, and the sweet taste of justice served ice cold. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights of Meridian Solutions buzzed overhead as I adjusted my navy blazer and checked my reflection in the conference room's glass walls one final time. Today was the day I had been preparing for over 8 months. The day that would either catapult our small but innovative consulting firm into the big leagues or leave us scrambling for survival in an increasingly competitive market. My name is Maya Chen, and for the past 4 years, I had poured my soul into this company. What started as a junior analyst position had evolved into something far more significant, though my official title of senior project manager hardly reflected the reality of my contributions. I had developed our proprietary client retention algorithm, streamlined our operational processes, and personally managed relationships with some of our most demanding corporate clients. But today was different. Today, I was presenting to Blackstone Ventures, the most prestigious investment firm on the West Coast. Their portfolio included household names that had revolutionized entire industries, and they were known for their meticulous due diligence and transformative partnerships. Securing their backing would mean not just funding, but validation, credibility, and access to a network that could change everything. I had spent countless sleepless nights perfecting every slide, every transition, every data point. The presentation was my masterpiece, a comprehensive overview of our company's potential wrapped in a compelling narrative that I knew would resonate with investors who had seen thousands of pitches. The financial projections were conservative but promising, the market analysis was thorough, and the growth strategy was both ambitious and achievable. Victoria Sterling, our CEO and my direct supervisor, swept into the conference room wearing her signature red power suit and an expression of barely contained anxiety. At 42, Victoria had built Meridian Solutions from nothing, and I genuinely respected her business acumen and drive. She had taken a chance on me when I was fresh out of graduate school, and I had always felt a sense of loyalty toward her. Maya, she said, her voice carrying that familiar edge that appeared whenever she was stressed, are you absolutely certain everything is ready? We cannot afford any mistakes today. I nodded confidently, gesturing toward my laptop where the presentation was loaded and ready. Every detail has been triple-checked. The financial models are solid, the market research is current, and I've anticipated every possible question they might ask. We're as prepared as we can possibly be. Victoria's eyes scanned the setup, taking in the pristine conference table, the perfectly arranged materials, and the backup projector I had insisted on having ready. Good. Remember, this presentation represents 4 years of our lives. Everything we've worked for comes down to the next hour. The weight of her words settled over me like a familiar blanket. I had always thrived under pressure, and today felt like the culmination of everything I had learned and achieved. My presentation told the story of our company's evolution, but more than that, it showcased the innovative approaches and strategic thinking that I had brought to the table. The client retention algorithm alone could revolutionize how consulting firms operated, and I had the data to prove it. As the clock approached 10:30, I heard voices in the hallway. The Blackstone Ventures team was arriving, and from the confident timbre of their conversation, it was clear these were people accustomed to making decisions that moved markets. Victoria straightened her shoulders and activated what I privately called her CEO mode, a transformation that made her seem both more authoritative and more distant. Maya, you'll handle the technical portions and the operational overview. I'll manage the financial discussion and the partnership structure. Remember, we're equals in this room today. I appreciated her words, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something in her demeanor had shifted. There was a tension in her posture that went beyond normal pre-meeting nerves, a guardedness that I hadn't noticed before. But I pushed the observation aside, attributing it to the magnitude of what we were about to undertake. The Blackstone team entered with the quiet confidence of people who controlled hundreds of millions in investment capital. Leading them was Michael Harrison, a senior partner whose reputation for transforming promising companies into industry leaders was legendary. Behind him came Sarah Kim, their chief technology officer, who reportedly could dissect a business model in minutes, and James Morrison, a financial analyst known for his ability to spot both opportunities and red flags with unsettling accuracy. As we exchanged introductions and settled around the conference table, I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that always accompanied high-stakes situations. This was where I thrived, where months of preparation crystallized into moments of clarity and purpose. I had reviewed their investment philosophy, studied their portfolio companies, and crafted my presentation to align perfectly with their strategic interests. "We're excited to learn more about Meridian Solutions," Michael said, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone accustomed to evaluating potential. "Your preliminary materials were intriguing, particularly the references to your proprietary retention technology." Victoria smiled, gesturing toward me. "Maya has been instrumental in developing those innovations. She'll be walking you through the technical aspects of our approach." I connected my laptop to the projection system, watching as my carefully designed opening slide appeared on the large screen. The Meridian Solutions logo appeared crisp and professional, followed by our mission statement and the agenda for our presentation. Everything was perfect, exactly as I had rehearsed dozens of times. "Thank you for this opportunity," I began, my voice steady and confident. "Over the next hour, I'll be showing you not just where Meridian Solutions stands today, but where we're positioned to go. Our growth trajectory is built on 3 foundational pillars that differentiate us in a crowded consulting market." The first 15 minutes unfolded flawlessly. I walked them through our company history, highlighting key milestones and client successes. The investors asked thoughtful questions, and I could see genuine interest in their expressions as I explained our unique approach to client engagement and retention. Sarah Kim seemed particularly intrigued by the technological components, leaning forward as I described the algorithmic approach we had developed. Then I reached the slide that would showcase our proprietary client retention algorithm, the innovation that represented months of my personal research and development. This was the centerpiece of our competitive advantage, the element that could justify the valuation we were seeking and demonstrate our potential for scalable growth. I clicked to advance to the next slide, and my laptop screen went completely black. The silence in the room was immediate and uncomfortable. I stared at the dark screen, my mind racing through possibilities. I had tested everything multiple times that morning. The laptop had been working perfectly just minutes before. I pressed the power button, hoping for a simple restart, but nothing happened. "Technical difficulties happen," Michael said diplomatically, though I could detect a slight shift in the room's energy. "Of course," I replied, maintaining my composure while internally calculating our options. "Let me switch to the backup system." But as I moved toward the backup laptop I had prepared, Victoria stepped forward with a concerned expression. "Maya, I'm afraid the backup system has the older version of the presentation, the one without the updated financial projections." My heart sank as I realized what she was saying. The backup contained a presentation that was 3 weeks old, missing crucial updates to our revenue models and the refined version of the retention algorithm that I had spent days perfecting. It would be functional, but it wouldn't tell the complete story of where we stood today. "We can reschedule," I offered, though I knew how difficult it had been to secure this meeting in the first place. "Actually," Victoria interjected, her tone taking on a decisive quality, "why don't I handle the presentation from here? I know this material inside and out, and I can cover the key points without the slides." What happened next unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance that I was experiencing for the first time. Victoria launched into a presentation that was technically accurate but strategically incomplete. She described our client retention approach in general terms, missing the nuanced details that made it revolutionary. She presented financial projections that were conservative to the point of underwhelming. Most critically, she positioned herself as the primary architect of our innovations, referring to my contributions in passing as part of our talented team. I sat frozen, watching years of my work being reframed and diminished in real time. Victoria was an experienced presenter, and her delivery was smooth and confident. But she was telling a version of our story that erased the specificity and innovation that made us unique. The algorithm that I had developed became our retention methodology. The operational improvements I had implemented became strategic initiatives we've undertaken. The investors listened politely, but I could see their engagement waning. Without the detailed technical explanations and specific data points, our value proposition sounded generic, indistinguishable from dozens of other consulting firms seeking investment. Sarah Kim, who had been leaning forward with interest during my portion, now sat back with a neutral expression that suggested polite disengagement. As Victoria concluded her improvised presentation, Michael nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for your time. We'll review everything and be in touch within the next week." The phrases were courteous, but unmistakably dismissive. In the world of venture capital, "we'll be in touch" rarely meant good news. I had attended enough meetings to recognize the difference between genuine interest and polite disengagement, and this was clearly the latter. After the Blackstone team departed, I remained seated at the conference table, staring at my silent laptop and trying to process what had just occurred. Victoria gathered her materials with brisk efficiency, her earlier anxiety replaced by what looked suspiciously like relief. "Well," she said, adjusting her blazer, "that could have gone better, but I think we recovered reasonably well from the technical issues." I looked up at her, studying her expression for any sign of acknowledgement about what had just transpired. "Victoria, my laptop has never malfunctioned like that before, and the backup system had the current presentation loaded this morning. I checked it myself." She paused in her organizing, meeting my gaze with an expression of mild surprise. "Technology fails, Maya. It's unfortunate timing, but these things happen. What matters is that we adapted and still delivered a professional presentation." There was something in her tone, a carefully controlled quality that made my instincts prickle with suspicion. But accusing your CEO of sabotaging a crucial presentation seemed paranoid, the kind of conspiracy thinking that destroyed careers and reputations. I had no proof, only a growing sense that the coincidences were too convenient and the technical failures too perfectly timed. "Of course," I replied, forcing neutrality into my voice. "You're right, we adapted." But as I packed up my materials and prepared to return to my office, I couldn't shake the image of Victoria's smirk in that moment when my screen went black. It had been brief, lasting perhaps 2 seconds, but it had been unmistakably satisfied, like someone whose plan had worked exactly as intended. The rest of that day passed in a haze of routine tasks and mounting realization. I attempted to restart my laptop multiple times, running diagnostic tests and checking every possible explanation for the failure. The device worked perfectly, showing no signs of malfunction or technical issues. The backup system, when I examined it closely, contained presentation files that had been modified that very morning, replacing my updated version with an older draft. Coincidences were one thing, but deliberate file replacement was something else entirely. That evening, I sat in my small apartment overlooking the bay, nursing a glass of wine and confronting a truth that felt both devastating and clarifying. Victoria Sterling, the woman I had respected and worked tirelessly to support, had systematically undermined my presentation to ensure that she remained the central figure in any potential investment deal. The more I considered it, the more the pattern became clear. Over the past few months, Victoria had been increasingly protective of client relationships that I had developed, inserting herself into communications and meetings where my presence had previously been standard. She had begun referring to my innovations as company initiatives, subtly shifting credit away from individual contributions and toward organizational achievements. I had attributed these changes to natural evolution as our company grew, the normal process of a CEO taking a more hands-on role in strategic relationships. But now I understood that it had been something far more calculated. Victoria had been positioning herself to take credit for work that would define our company's future, and today's presentation had been the culmination of that strategy. The betrayal stung, but beneath the hurt was something else, a crystalline clarity about my own worth and capabilities. I had created something remarkable, developed innovations that could transform how consulting firms operated, and build relationships that generated tangible value. Those achievements existed independently of Victoria's recognition or approval. As I prepared for bed that night, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible 12 hours earlier. I was going to leave Meridian Solutions, but not quietly and not without ensuring that my contributions were properly recognized and protected. If Victoria wanted to play games with my career, she was about to learn that I was far better at strategy than she had imagined. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that often follows difficult decisions. I woke with a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in months. The emotional fog of betrayal burned away by determination. Before even checking my email, I began documenting everything I could remember about my contributions to the company, creating a comprehensive record of my innovations, client relationships, and strategic initiatives. The client retention algorithm was entirely my creation, developed during evenings and weekends using methodologies I had learned in graduate school and refined through practical application. I had all of my research notes, development timelines, and testing results saved on my personal devices. The operational improvements I had implemented were documented in reports that bore my signature and detailed my specific recommendations. More importantly, I had cultivated relationships with several of our key clients who knew exactly who had been managing their accounts and delivering results. People like David Chen at Innovative Systems, who had specifically requested that I lead their quarterly reviews, and Maria Rodriguez at Coastal Enterprises, who had praised my strategic insights in written testimonials. As I reviewed this documentation, I realized something that Victoria had apparently failed to consider in her calculation. While she could control the narrative within our company and manipulate presentations to investors, she couldn't erase the external relationships and reputation I had built independently. I arrived at the office that morning with renewed confidence, greeting colleagues with genuine warmth while internally preparing for the conversation I knew was coming. Victoria's office door was closed, unusual for someone who typically maintained an open-door policy, and I could hear her voice through the glass as she conducted what sounded like a difficult phone call. Around 10:30, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Miss Chen, this is Sarah Kim from Blackstone Ventures. Could you spare a few minutes for a phone conversation today? I have some questions about yesterday's presentation." I stared at the message, reading it 3 times to ensure I understood correctly. Sarah Kim, the chief technology officer who had seemed most interested in our technical innovations, was reaching out to me directly rather than going through Victoria or official company channels. I stepped into an empty conference room and returned her call, my curiosity overriding any concerns about protocol or proper channels. "Maya," Sarah said after I introduced myself, "thank you for taking my call. I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly, but I had some specific questions about the retention technology you mentioned yesterday." "Of course," I replied, settling into my chair. "What would you like to know?" "Well, that's just it. You barely had a chance to explain the technology before the technical difficulties interrupted. Your CEO gave us a general overview, but I'm interested in the specific methodologies and implementation details. Could you walk me through your approach?" For the next 20 minutes, I found myself in the kind of detailed technical discussion that I had been preparing for months. Sarah asked insightful questions about algorithmic design, data collection methodologies, and scalability considerations. I explained the statistical models I had developed, the machine learning components I had incorporated, and the specific metrics that demonstrated improved client retention rates. "This is fascinating work," Sarah said when I finished explaining the validation testing I had conducted. "The approach you're describing is significantly more sophisticated than what we heard yesterday. Your CEO mentioned retention methodology, but this sounds like proprietary technology with genuine competitive advantages." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "The algorithm represents several months of dedicated research and development. I'm proud of what we've accomplished." "Maya, can I ask you something directly? Are you the primary developer of this technology?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications that I couldn't fully process.
Sarah Kim was asking me to either confirm or deny what Victoria had implied during her presentation, and my answer could have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. Yes, I said simply. I developed the algorithm, conducted the testing, and implemented the system we're currently using. I see. And the operational improvements that were mentioned yesterday? Those were also my initiatives. I can provide detailed documentation of the research, recommendations, and implementation processes. Sarah was quiet for a moment, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. Maya, would you be available for a more comprehensive conversation? I'd like to discuss your work in greater detail, and I think my partners would be very interested in what you've developed. I'd be happy to discuss our company's innovations, I replied, maintaining professional boundaries while acknowledging my personal contributions. Actually, I should be more specific. We're interested in discussing your innovations, and we'd like to explore potential opportunities for collaboration. Would you be available to meet with our full team tomorrow afternoon? My heart began racing as I processed what she was really asking.
Blackstone Ventures wanted to meet with me directly, not as a representative of Meridian Solutions, but as the creator of technology they found compelling. They were interested in potential collaboration, which in venture capital terminology could mean anything from consulting arrangements to acquisition discussions. I would need to check my schedule, I said, playing for time to think through the implications, but I'm generally available. Excellent. I'll send you details about timing and location. Maya, I want to be transparent with you. Yesterday's presentation raised some questions for us about the actual source and ownership of the innovations we're evaluating. We believe in working directly with the people who create value, and we'd like to better understand your role in everything we discussed. After ending the call, I sat in the empty conference room for several minutes, staring out at the city skyline and trying to process the shift that had just occurred. 24 hours ago, I had been a loyal employee preparing to support my company's growth. Now, I was being courted directly by one of the most influential investment firms in the industry. The irony was not lost on me. Victoria's attempt to diminish my contributions had apparently backfired, highlighting the disconnect between what she claimed and what I had actually developed. By trying to take credit for my work, she had inadvertently demonstrated that she didn't understand it well enough to explain it convincingly. I returned to my desk and spent the rest of the day in a careful balancing act, fulfilling my current responsibilities while mentally preparing for a conversation that could change the trajectory of my career. I reviewed every aspect of my work, organized my documentation, and prepared to present my innovations to people who clearly understood their value. That evening, I called my mentor from graduate school, Dr. Jennifer Liu, who had transitioned from academia to consulting and understood both the technical and business aspects of what I was navigating. Maya, she said, after I explained the situation, what you're describing sounds like a recognition of your true contributions. The question you need to ask yourself is what you want to achieve and whether your current environment will allow you to reach your potential. I've been loyal to Victoria and to this company, I replied, but I'm starting to wonder if that loyalty has been one-sided. Loyalty is valuable, but it should be mutual. If someone is taking credit for your work and limiting your opportunities, then you need to consider whether staying serves your long-term interests. Dr. Liu's words echoed in my mind as I prepared for the next day's meeting. I had always prided myself on being a team player, someone who contributed to collective success rather than seeking individual recognition. But there was a difference between being collaborative and being exploited, and yesterday's presentation had made that distinction painfully clear. The Blackstone Ventures offices occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower in the financial district, with panoramic views of the bay and an atmosphere of quiet efficiency. As I rode the elevator to the 32nd floor, I felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement that reminded me of my first job interview after graduate school. Sarah Kim met me in the lobby, and as we walked toward the conference room, I was struck by the difference in atmosphere compared to our small offices at Meridian Solutions. Everything here spoke of success and resources, from the curated art on the walls to the subtle hum of serious conversations happening behind glass-walled offices. Maya, thank you for coming in, Michael Harrison said, as we entered a conference room that was larger than our entire break area. We've been looking forward to continuing yesterday's conversation. Joining Michael and Sarah was James Morrison, the financial analyst, and 2 additional partners I hadn't met previously.
The setup felt formal, but not intimidating, more like a collaborative discussion than an interrogation. "We'll be direct," Michael continued. "Yesterday's presentation left us with questions about the actual source and development of the innovations we found most compelling. Your phone conversation with Sarah provided some clarity, but we'd like to understand the full scope of your contributions." For the next hour, I walked them through every aspect of my work at Meridian Solutions, from the initial research that led to the retention algorithm to the specific client relationships I had developed and managed. Unlike yesterday's interrupted presentation, this conversation was detailed and technical, with questions that demonstrated their genuine understanding of what I had created. "The technology you've developed," James said, referring to notes he had been taking throughout our discussion, "represents a significant competitive advantage in the consulting space. The operational improvements show measurable impact, and the client relationships demonstrate practical application of your innovations." Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious. "Maya, we need to ask about intellectual property ownership and any contractual obligations you might have." I had anticipated this question and prepared accordingly. The algorithm was developed using my own research methodology and implemented during my own time. While I used company resources for testing and implementation, the core intellectual property is based on work I did independently. My employment contract doesn't include specific IP assignment clauses for innovations developed outside of assigned projects. And the client relationships? Are personal and professional connections that I've cultivated through excellent service and strategic guidance. While they're currently channeled through Meridian Solutions, they're based on trust and results that I've delivered personally. Michael exchanged glances with his colleagues before continuing. "Maya, we're going to be completely transparent with you. We're not interested in investing in Meridian Solutions as currently structured. The presentation we saw yesterday didn't demonstrate the level of innovation or leadership we look for in our portfolio companies." My heart sank, thinking about what this would mean for Victoria and the company we had built together. "However," he continued, "we are very interested in the work you've described today. We believe you've developed something with significant market potential, and we'd like to discuss opportunities for supporting your continued development of these innovations." "What kind of opportunities?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the direction this conversation was heading. "We're prepared to offer you a position as Chief Innovation Officer for one of our portfolio companies, with equity participation and the resources to fully develop your algorithmic approach. Alternatively, we'd be interested in discussing funding for a venture that would allow you to continue developing your innovations independently." The room fell silent as I processed what they were offering. This wasn't just a job opportunity, it was a chance to build something entirely new, with the backing of one of the most respected investment firms in the industry.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"There's one more thing," Sarah added. "We've been in preliminary discussions with several of our portfolio companies about consulting leadership positions. Your background and innovations would make you an ideal candidate for a chief executive officer role at a consulting firm that could benefit from your expertise." I felt my breath catch as I realized what she was implying. They weren't just offering me individual opportunities, they were suggesting that I could step directly into a leadership role that would allow me to implement my vision from the top. "The position I'm thinking of," Sarah continued, "is with Meridian Solutions." The words hung in the air like a revelation that reframed everything I thought I understood about the situation. Blackstone Ventures wasn't just interested in my innovations, they were prepared to restructure our entire company to ensure that those innovations could be properly developed and implemented. "I don't understand," I said, though part of me was beginning to grasp the magnitude of what they were suggesting. Michael smiled. "Maya, we've been evaluating Meridian Solutions for several months, long before yesterday's presentation. We were approached about potential investment opportunities, and our preliminary research indicated significant potential. However, yesterday's meeting clarified some important questions about leadership and strategic direction. Your CEO presented a vision that was adequate but not compelling," James added. "She demonstrated competent management skills, but not the innovative thinking we associate with transformative growth. You, on the other hand, have shown us genuine innovation with practical applications and measurable results." Sarah opened a folder and placed several documents on the table. We're prepared to offer you the position of Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Solutions, with Blackstone Ventures as the primary investor and strategic partner. You would have full authority to implement your vision, hire your own team, and develop your innovations with substantial financial backing. I stared at the documents, reading phrases like executive compensation package, equity participation, and strategic autonomy while trying to process the complete reversal of everything I had expected from this meeting. What about Victoria? I asked, though I was surprised to find that my primary emotion wasn't sympathy, but curiosity about how they had reached this decision. Miss Sterling would be offered a transition package and consulting arrangement that recognizes her contributions to building the company foundation, Michael replied diplomatically. However, our investment would be contingent on leadership changes that align with our strategic vision. We believe in backing innovators, Sarah said. Your work demonstrates the kind of thinking that creates lasting value, and we want to ensure that you have the resources and authority to reach your full potential. I looked around the room at these influential people who were offering to completely reshape my professional life, replacing years of gradual advancement with immediate recognition and resources. The opportunity was extraordinary, but it also meant fundamentally altering my relationship with Victoria and the company we had built together. I'll need time to consider this, I said, though every instinct was telling me that this was the recognition and opportunity I had been working toward for years. Of course, Michael replied, this is a significant decision. Take the time you need, but we'd appreciate an answer within the next week. The consulting market moves quickly, and we'd like to implement changes as soon as possible. As I left the Blackstone offices that afternoon, I felt like I was walking through a dream that was too perfect to be real. In less than 48 hours, I had gone from being a loyal employee whose contributions were minimized to being offered the leadership of the entire company with substantial investment backing. The elevator ride down to street level gave me time to reflect on the irony of the situation. Victoria's attempt to take credit for my work had led directly to this opportunity. By diminishing my contributions during the presentation, she had created a contrast that highlighted the gap between her understanding and my expertise. The investors had recognized that disconnect and responded by going directly to the source of the innovations they found compelling. That evening, I called Dr. Liu again to discuss this unexpected development. Maya, she said after I explained what had happened, this sounds like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build something significant. The question isn't whether you deserve this recognition, clearly you do. The question is whether you're prepared to embrace the responsibility and potential that comes with it. I keep thinking about Victoria and what this means for her, I admitted. Despite everything that happened, she did give me opportunities to grow and learn. That's commendable, but you need to remember that professional relationships should be based on mutual respect and fair recognition. If she was willing to take credit for your work, then she was already changing the terms of your relationship. Dr. Liu's perspective helped clarify my thinking, but I still needed time to process the emotional complexity of the situation. I had always imagined advancement as a gradual process, earning recognition through consistent performance and building toward leadership roles over time. This felt like skipping several steps in that progression, jumping directly to the outcome I had been working toward without the traditional pathway. But as I reviewed everything that had led to this moment, I realized that I had been preparing for leadership without recognizing it. The innovations I had developed, the client relationships I had built, and the strategic thinking I had applied were all qualities that defined successful executives. The only difference was that I would now have the authority and resources to implement my vision fully. The next morning, I arrived at Meridian Solutions with a new perspective on everything around me. The office that had felt like home for 4 years now seemed smaller, more limited, like a launching pad rather than a destination. My colleagues greeted me with their usual warmth, but I found myself evaluating our team dynamics and operational processes with the eyes of someone who might soon be responsible for strategic direction. Victoria's office door was open, and she was reviewing what appeared to be financial reports with an expression of focused concentration. I knocked gently on the doorframe, and she looked up with a smile that seemed slightly forced. "Maya, good morning.
How are you feeling after yesterday's presentation? I know the technical difficulties were frustrating, but I think we recovered well. I studied her expression, looking for any sign that she understood the true impact of what had occurred.
Her tone was casual, almost dismissive, as if the presentation had been a minor setback rather than a pivotal moment that would reshape our entire company. Actually, Victoria, I wanted to update you on something. Blackstone Ventures contacted me yesterday afternoon. They had some follow-up questions about our retention technology. Her smile faltered slightly, replaced by an expression of careful attention. Oh, what kind of questions? Technical details about the algorithm development and implementation. They wanted to understand the specific methodologies and competitive advantages. Victoria's posture straightened, and I could see her processing the implications of the investors contacting me directly. I see. And what did you tell them? I answered their questions about the work I've done. They seemed particularly interested in the innovation process and the measurable results we've achieved. Maya, Victoria said, her tone taking on a cautious quality. I hope you remember that we're a team here. Individual contributions are important, but our success comes from collective effort and shared vision. The irony of her words was almost overwhelming, given that she had spent the previous day claiming individual credit for collective efforts. But I maintained my composure, recognizing that this conversation was likely being shaped by concerns about how my direct contact with investors might affect her position. Of course, I replied, team success has always been my priority. Good, I'm glad we're aligned on that. If Blackstone has additional questions, please make sure to keep me informed. As CEO, I need to stay involved in all investor communications. I nodded, though I had no intention of sharing the details of conversations that were fundamentally about my individual contributions and potential opportunities. Victoria was trying to reassert control over a situation that had already moved beyond her influence, but she clearly didn't understand the extent of what had changed. Over the next few days, I found myself observing our company operations with new eyes, mentally cataloging the changes I would implement if given the authority to reshape our strategic direction. The client retention technology was just the beginning. I had ideas for operational improvements, team development initiatives, and service innovations that could transform how we delivered value to our clients. I also spent time reviewing the legal and practical aspects of the opportunity Blackstone had presented. The transition would be complex, involving contractual negotiations, staff changes, and strategic planning that would affect everyone in our small company. But the more I considered the potential, the more convinced I became that this was the right path forward. On Thursday afternoon, I made my decision. I called Sarah Kim and arranged a follow-up meeting to discuss the specifics of their offer and the timeline for implementation. Maya, she said when I reached her, we're pleased to hear from you. Have you had time to consider our proposal? I have, and I'm very interested in moving forward. I'd like to discuss the details of the transition and the strategic vision for moving forward. Excellent. Can you come in tomorrow afternoon? We'd like to finalize the arrangements and begin the transition process as soon as possible. That evening, I drafted a resignation letter that I would submit to Victoria once the Blackstone arrangements were confirmed. But this resignation would be different from a typical job departure. It would be the first step in a transition that would fundamentally reshape the company she had built. Friday's meeting with Blackstone Ventures was comprehensive and detailed, covering everything from compensation packages to strategic planning timelines. The opportunity they were offering exceeded my highest expectations, with resources and authority that would allow me to implement innovations I had only dreamed about previously. Maya, Michael said as we concluded our discussions, we'll be making the transition announcement to your current leadership early next week. We believe in being transparent and professional throughout this process. What exactly will you be telling Victoria? That Blackstone Ventures has decided to invest in Meridian Solutions contingent on leadership changes that align with our strategic vision. We'll be offering her a consulting arrangement and transition package that recognizes her contributions while establishing new executive leadership. I felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension about how Victoria would respond to this news. Part of me hoped she would understand that this represented growth and opportunity for the company she had built. Another part anticipated that she would view this as a personal betrayal, regardless of the professional justifications. But as I signed the preliminary agreements that would make me the youngest CEO in Blackstone Ventures' portfolio, I realized that my concerns about Victoria's reaction were secondary to the opportunity to build something remarkable. For years, I had been developing innovations and strategic approaches that could transform the consulting industry. Now, I would have the resources and authority to implement that vision fully. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. I reviewed every aspect of our current operations, developed preliminary plans for team expansion and technology development, and mentally prepared for the conversation that would reshape my relationship with Victoria and establish my new role as her replacement. Monday morning arrived with the clarity that often accompanies significant life changes. I dressed carefully in my best suit, arriving at the office early to prepare for what I knew would be an extraordinary day. Victoria's car was already in the parking lot, suggesting that she had also arrived early, possibly to catch up on work before the normal business day began. At exactly 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah Kim. "On our way up, Victoria has been informed and is expecting us." I felt my pulse quicken as I realized that the formal transition was beginning. Within the next hour, everything about my professional life would change, and I would either be stepping into the role I had been preparing for or dealing with the consequences of a decision that hadn't worked out as planned. The elevator doors opened, and the Blackstone Ventures team emerged with the same quiet confidence they had displayed during our previous meetings.
But this time, their presence in our small office felt transformative, like the arrival of forces that would reshape our entire organizational structure. Victoria appeared from her office, her expression carefully controlled but clearly reflecting the tension of someone whose world was about to change dramatically. She greeted the investors with professional courtesy, but I could see the strain in her posture and the forced quality of her smile. "Miss Sterling," Michael said, "thank you for making time for this important conversation. As we discussed on the phone, Blackstone Ventures has completed our evaluation of Meridian Solutions and is prepared to move forward with a strategic investment." "I'm pleased to hear that," Victoria replied, though her tone suggested uncertainty about what this investment would entail. "Our investment is contingent on organizational changes that align with our strategic vision," Sarah continued. "We believe that Meridian Solutions has significant potential, but realizing that potential requires leadership that can fully develop and implement the innovations we've identified." Victoria's eyes moved between the investors and me, and I could see her beginning to understand the implications of what they were saying. "What kind of organizational changes?" "We're offering you a consulting arrangement and transition package that recognizes your contributions to building the company foundation," James explained, placing a folder of documents on the table. "However, our investment will establish new executive leadership under Maya Chen as Chief Executive Officer." The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable. Victoria stared at the documents, then at me, her expression cycling through surprise, betrayal, and anger before settling into a carefully controlled neutrality. "Maya," she said finally, her voice tight with emotion, "you knew about this." "I was contacted by Blackstone following their evaluation of our company," I replied, maintaining professional composure despite the personal complexity of the moment. "They were interested in discussing my innovations and potential opportunities for growth." "Your innovations," Victoria repeated, her tone sharp with implications. "I see." Michael stepped forward diplomatically. "Miss Sterling, this decision reflects our assessment of strategic potential and leadership capabilities. Maya has developed technology and approaches that represent significant competitive advantages, and we believe she's best positioned to lead the company's growth phase." Victoria opened the folder and reviewed the documents, her expression becoming increasingly tense as she read through the terms of her transition. The package was generous, reflecting both the value of her contributions and the professional manner in which Blackstone handled leadership changes. But I could see that no amount of financial consideration would ease the personal impact of being replaced. "How long have you been planning this?" Victoria asked, looking directly at me. I've been developing my innovations for months, I replied honestly, but this opportunity only emerged after Tuesday's presentation when Blackstone recognized the potential of what I've created. Tuesday's presentation, Victoria repeated, and I could see understanding dawning in her expression. The presentation where your technology mysteriously failed? The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clearly understood by everyone in the room. Victoria was realizing that her attempt to control Tuesday's narrative had led directly to this moment, creating the contrast that allowed investors to recognize the true source of our competitive advantages. Technology failures happen, I said, echoing her own words from that day. What matters is how we adapt and move forward. Victoria closed the folder and stood up, her composure finally cracking slightly. I built this company from nothing. I gave you opportunities to grow and learn, and this is how you repay that? Victoria, I said, standing as well, you did give me opportunities, and I'm grateful for that, but I also contributed value that deserves recognition and the chance to grow into something larger. Recognition? Victoria's voice was bitter. You mean taking over my company? I mean building on what we've started together, I replied. Meridian Solutions has tremendous potential, and with Blackstone's resources and strategic support, we can realize that potential fully. Sarah stepped forward, maintaining the diplomatic tone that characterized all of Blackstone's interactions. Miss Sterling, we understand this is a significant transition. However, we believe this structure will benefit everyone involved, including the employees and clients who depend on Meridian Solutions' continued growth. Victoria looked around the room one final time, her gaze settling on me with an expression that mixed hurt, anger, and what might have been grudging respect. You planned this perfectly, Maya. I'll give you that. I didn't plan this, I replied honestly. I just recognized an opportunity when it appeared. An opportunity that appeared because you undermined my presentation to investors. The accusation was direct and serious, but I met her gaze steadily. I answered questions about my work honestly and completely. The investors drew their own conclusions about leadership and strategic potential. Victoria gathered her personal items from the conference table, maintaining her composure but clearly eager to end this confrontation. I'll review the transition package and respond appropriately, but understand that I won't be making this easy for you. I wouldn't expect anything else, I replied.
But I hope you'll consider what's best for the company and the team we've built together. After Victoria left the office, the Blackstone team spent the next several hours helping me understand the practical aspects of the transition. There were contracts to sign, strategic plans to develop, and staff meetings to arrange. By the end of the day, I was officially the Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Solutions, with resources and authority that would have seemed impossible just 1 week earlier. As I sat in Victoria's former office that evening, looking out at the city lights and reflecting on everything that had changed, I felt a profound sense of completion. For years, I had been developing innovations and building relationships while working within someone else's vision. Now, I had the opportunity to implement my own strategic direction, backed by investors who understood and valued what I had created. The irony wasn't lost on me that Victoria's attempt to diminish my contributions had led directly to this recognition. By trying to take credit for my work, she had highlighted the gap between her understanding and my expertise. The investors had recognized that disconnect and responded by supporting the source of the innovations they found compelling. But beyond the poetic justice of the situation, I was most excited about the potential to build something remarkable. The client retention algorithm was just the beginning. With Blackstone's resources and strategic support, I could develop innovations that would transform how consulting firms operated and delivered value to their clients. Over the following weeks, I implemented changes that reflected my vision for strategic growth and operational excellence. We expanded our technical capabilities, enhanced our client service protocols, and developed new service offerings that leveraged the algorithmic approaches I had pioneered. The response from both existing and potential clients was overwhelmingly positive, validating the strategic direction I had chosen. 3 months later, Meridian Solutions had doubled our client roster and tripled our revenue, establishing ourselves as one of the most innovative consulting firms in the region. The recognition felt gratifying, but more than that, it felt like the natural result of having the authority and resources to implement approaches I had been developing for years. Victoria, to her credit, had transitioned professionally and established her own consulting practice focused on small business development. Our relationship remained strained, but I respected her entrepreneurial spirit and hoped that time would allow us to appreciate each other's contributions to what we had built together. As I reflected on everything that had led to this transformation, I realized that the most important lesson wasn't about workplace politics or professional betrayal. It was about recognizing your own value and having the courage to pursue opportunities that allow you to reach your full potential, even when those opportunities require difficult decisions and personal risk. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply succeeding so completely that the people who underestimated you have no choice but to recognize what they lost when they chose to diminish rather than celebrate your contributions. And sometimes, justice comes in the form of an opportunity to build exactly what you've been dreaming of, with the resources and authority to make that dream a reality. 6 months into my tenure as CEO, I received a phone call that would test everything I had built at Meridian Solutions. The voice on the other end belonged to Marcus Webb, CEO of Pinnacle Consulting Group, our largest competitor in the regional market. Maya Chen, he said, his tone carrying the calculated friendliness of someone about to make a business proposition. I've been hearing impressive things about your company's growth trajectory. Congratulations on the leadership transition. I leaned back in my executive chair, studying the panoramic view of the bay that had become my daily backdrop. Thank you, Marcus. What can I do for you? Actually, I'm calling with an opportunity that I think will interest you. Pinnacle is expanding our technology division, and we're looking for proven innovators to lead that initiative. Your retention algorithm has caught our attention, and we'd like to discuss bringing you on board as our Chief Technology Officer. The offer hung in the air like a challenge disguised as an opportunity. Marcus Webb was known for his aggressive acquisition strategies, often targeting smaller firms and absorbing their talent and innovations into his larger organization. The fact that he was approaching me directly, rather than proposing a company acquisition, suggested something more personal. That's flattering, Marcus, but I'm quite content with my current position. Meridian Solutions is exactly where I want to be. I understand loyalty, Maya, but consider the resources we could provide. Pinnacle has the infrastructure, client base, and capital to scale your innovations beyond anything possible in your current environment. We're prepared to offer a compensation package that would triple your current salary, plus equity participation in a Fortune 500 consulting firm. I found myself smiling at his persistence. What makes you think I'm interested in leaving the company I'm currently leading? Because intelligent people recognize when they've outgrown their circumstances, Marcus replied smoothly. You've achieved remarkable results with limited resources. Imagine what you could accomplish with unlimited support. After politely declining his offer and ending the call, I sat contemplating the implications of his approach. Marcus Webb didn't make recruitment calls without strategic motivation, and his interest in my innovations suggested that our competitive impact was being felt throughout the industry. More concerning was his assumption that I could be lured away from my own company, as if leadership of Meridian Solutions was somehow less valuable than a senior position at his larger firm. That afternoon, I called an emergency meeting with my senior team to discuss what I suspected was the beginning of a more comprehensive competitive challenge. Our conference room now accommodated 12 people comfortably, a stark contrast to the cramped space we had occupied just months earlier. The faces around the table represented the talent I had recruited and promoted since taking leadership, individuals who shared my vision for innovation and client service excellence. I want everyone to understand that we're entering a new phase of competitive pressure, I began, addressing the group of project managers, technology specialists, and client relationship directors who had become the backbone of our expanded operations. Pinnacle Consulting Group is making overtures that suggest they view us as a threat worth neutralizing. Jennifer Park, whom I had promoted to Director of Client Relations, leaned forward with interest. What kind of overtures? Direct recruitment attempts, specifically targeting our leadership and innovations.
This typically indicates that a larger firm is considering either acquisition or aggressive competition designed to limit our growth. David Kim, our new technology development manager, raised his hand. Should we be concerned about intellectual property protection? If they're interested in our algorithms, they might be exploring alternative ways to access that technology. His question highlighted one of my primary concerns. While I had taken steps to protect our proprietary innovations, a well-funded competitor could potentially develop similar technologies or recruit away the team members who understood our implementation processes.
We're going to strengthen our IP protections and implement additional security measures, I replied. But more importantly, we're going to accelerate our own growth and innovation timeline. The best defense against competitive pressure is continued advancement that keeps us ahead of anyone trying to replicate our approach. Over the following weeks, I implemented a strategic plan designed to consolidate our competitive advantages while expanding our market presence. We filed additional patents on algorithmic improvements, established exclusive partnerships with key technology vendors, and began developing next-generation services that would further differentiate our capabilities. The response from our clients was enthusiastic. Maria Rodriguez from Coastal Enterprises, who had been one of my strongest supporters during the transition period, called to express her excitement about our expanded service offerings. Maya, the strategic consulting you've provided has transformed how we approach client retention and operational efficiency. Whatever you're doing over there, it's working. Our board has approved expanding our contract to include your new predictive analytics services. Similar calls came from other long-term clients who had witnessed our evolution from a competent consulting firm to an innovation leader. The validation was gratifying, but it also reinforced my understanding that we were building something genuinely valuable that others would continue trying to access or acquire. Then came the call that changed everything. Maya, this is Victoria Sterling. I hadn't heard from Victoria since her departure 6 months earlier, and her voice carried a tension that suggested this wasn't a social conversation. Hello, Victoria. How are you doing? I'm calling because I thought you should know that Marcus Webb approached me last week. He's been asking detailed questions about your retention algorithm and the intellectual property ownership structure at Meridian Solutions. I felt my stomach tighten as I processed the implications of what she was telling me. What kind of questions? Specific technical questions about how the algorithm was developed, who had access to the research data, and whether there were any disputes about ownership or attribution. Maya, I think he's building a case to challenge your IP claims. The phone call with Victoria lasted nearly an hour as she detailed her conversation with Marcus Webb. According to her account, Pinnacle Consulting Group was conducting comprehensive research into our company's innovations, looking for any legal or technical vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Marcus had been particularly interested in the timeline of my algorithm development and whether any of the work had been done using company resources during Victoria's tenure as CEO. Why are you telling me this? I asked, genuinely curious about her motivation for providing information that could help me defend against competitive threats. Victoria was quiet for a moment before responding. Because whatever happened between us, you did develop that technology, and you deserve to maintain control over your innovations. I may not agree with how things ended, but I won't help someone else steal your work. Her words carried a weight that went beyond professional courtesy. Despite the complexity of our relationship and the circumstances of her departure, Victoria was demonstrating a fungent integrity that I hadn't fully appreciated during our time working together. Thank you for the warning. I'll make sure our legal team is prepared for whatever Marcus might be planning. Maya, Victoria said before ending the call, be careful. Marcus Webb doesn't play fair when he wants something, and he clearly wants what you've built. The following Monday, I convened an emergency meeting with our legal counsel, intellectual property attorney, and senior leadership team. The conference room that had once hosted our disastrous presentation to Blackstone Ventures now served as a war room where we planned our defense against corporate espionage and potential litigation. Based on what Victoria shared, we need to assume that Pinnacle is preparing either a legal challenge to our IP claims or a more aggressive competitive strategy, I explained to the assembled team. I want comprehensive documentation of all development timelines, research methodologies, and implementation processes.
Our attorney, Maya Chen, who specialized in technology and intellectual property law, had been reviewing our patent filings and employment contracts since I first described Marcus Webb's recruitment attempt. Maya, your IP position is strong, but we need to be prepared for challenges related to the timing and circumstances of your algorithm development. What kind of challenges? If they can demonstrate that significant portions of the research were conducted using Meridian Solutions resources during your employment under Victoria Sterling, they might argue that the company held partial ownership rights that weren't properly transferred when you became CEO. The legal complexities were frustrating, but I understood the strategic importance of addressing them proactively. We spent the next several hours reviewing every aspect of my innovation development, creating a comprehensive timeline that documented the independent nature of my research and the specific contributions that constituted proprietary intellectual property. 2 weeks later, the legal challenge arrived in the form of a cease and desist letter delivered by courier on a Friday afternoon. Pinnacle Consulting Group was claiming that our client retention algorithm incorporated proprietary methodologies that they had developed independently, and they were demanding that we discontinue its use and provide access to our implementation documentation for their review. This is completely fabricated, I told Maya Chen as we reviewed the allegations in detail. They're claiming ownership of mathematical approaches that are well established in academic literature, and they're suggesting that our implementation somehow infringes on their work. It's a fishing expedition, Sarah agreed. They're hoping to force us into a settlement that gives them access to your actual innovations, or alternatively, to tie us up in litigation that consumes resources and limits our growth. The legal battle that followed tested everything I had learned about leadership, strategic thinking, and maintaining focus under pressure. Pinnacle's attorneys were skilled and well-funded, deploying tactics designed to overwhelm our smaller legal team and force a quick resolution in their favor. But they had underestimated both my determination and the strength of our documentation. Every aspect of my algorithm development was meticulously recorded, from the initial academic research that informed my approach to the specific implementation details that created our competitive advantages. More importantly, I had the support of clients who could testify to the measurable results and innovative approaches that distinguished our services from anything available elsewhere in the market. The deposition process was grueling, with Pinnacle's attorneys spending hours questioning every detail of my development timeline and attempting to find inconsistencies or gaps that could support their claims. Ms. Chen, the lead attorney asked during one particularly intensive session, "Isn't it true that you conducted significant portions of your algorithm research during normal business hours while employed by Meridian Solutions under Victoria Sterling's leadership?" "I conducted research during personal time using my own methodologies and academic resources," I replied calmly. "While some testing and implementation occurred during business hours, the core intellectual property was developed independently and represents innovations that I brought to the company rather than innovations that the company developed." "But you used company data and client relationships to test and refine your algorithms."
I used publicly available data analysis techniques and client feedback that was part of normal service delivery. The specific mathematical models and predictive approaches that constitute our proprietary technology were developed using my own research and expertise. The questioning continued for hours, but I could see that their case was built on assumptions rather than evidence. They were hoping to find admissions or inconsistencies that could support a claim of shared ownership, but the reality was that my innovations were genuinely my own work, developed independently and implemented with proper legal protections. 3 months into the litigation, we received an unexpected development that would change the trajectory of the entire case. Dr. Jennifer Liu, my former mentor from graduate school, called with information that she thought might be relevant to our legal defense. "Maya, I've been following your situation through the academic networks, and I thought you should know that Marcus Webb's claims about independent development might not be entirely accurate." "What do you mean?" "One of my colleagues at Stanford has been consulting for Pinnacle on algorithmic development, and according to him, they didn't begin working on client retention technology until after your company's innovations became publicly known. Their development timeline postdates your patent filings by at least 6 months." Dr. Liu's information provided the missing piece of our defense strategy.
Not only were our innovations properly documented and legally protected, but Pinnacle's claims of independent development were demonstrably false. They had begun their competing technology development only after our success became apparent, suggesting that their legal challenge was entirely opportunistic. Our attorney immediately began investigating Pinnacle's development timeline, requesting documentation through the discovery process that would reveal the true sequence of their technological efforts. What we found confirmed Dr. Liu's information and provided clear evidence that their legal claims were without merit. Maya Chen said as we reviewed the discovery materials, "This is more than just a failed legal challenge. Pinnacle's behavior constitutes bad faith litigation, and we have grounds for a countersuit that could result in significant damages." The prospect of turning our defensive legal battle into an offensive strategy was appealing, but I was more interested in focusing our energy on continued growth and innovation rather than prolonged litigation. However, the principle was important, both for our company and for other small firms that might face similar predatory tactics from larger competitors. Let's pursue the countersuit, I decided, not because we need the financial damages, but because this kind of behavior shouldn't be profitable for companies like Pinnacle. The countersuit phase of our legal battle attracted attention throughout the consulting industry, with trade publications covering the case as an example of how smaller firms could successfully defend against intellectual property challenges from larger competitors. The publicity was generally positive for Meridian Solutions, reinforcing our reputation as an innovative company that was willing to stand up for its principles. More importantly, the legal victory validated the strategic decisions I had made since becoming CEO. The innovations we had developed were genuinely valuable, legally protected, and sufficiently differentiated to withstand challenges from well-funded competitors. Our client relationships were based on measurable results rather than marketing claims, and our team had demonstrated the kind of loyalty and competence that could sustain long-term growth. 6 months after the legal case concluded in our favor, I received another call from Marcus Webb. This time, his tone was markedly different from the confident recruitment pitch he had delivered a year earlier. "Maya, I'm calling to discuss a potential partnership opportunity between Pinnacle and Meridian Solutions." I couldn't suppress a smile at the irony of his proposal. "What kind of partnership, Marcus?" "We're interested in licensing your retention technology for use with our client base. The legal case clarified the ownership issues, and we'd like to explore a mutually beneficial arrangement for accessing your innovations." "So you want to pay for what you previously claimed to own?" Marcus was quiet for a moment before responding. "That's a fair characterization. We recognize the value of what you've developed, and we're prepared to offer licensing terms that would be profitable for both companies." The licensing negotiations that followed were complex but ultimately successful, resulting in an arrangement that provided Meridian Solutions with substantial recurring revenue while maintaining our competitive advantages in the market. Pinnacle gained access to proven technology that enhanced their service offerings, but under terms that acknowledged our ownership and innovation leadership. This is a perfect example of how competition can evolve into collaboration when both parties recognize mutual benefits, I explained to my senior team as we reviewed the final licensing agreement. We maintain our technological edge while generating revenue that funds continued innovation. The Pinnacle licensing deal was followed by similar arrangements with 3 other major consulting firms, creating a revenue stream that exceeded our traditional client services income. The irony wasn't lost on me that the companies which had initially viewed us as a threat were now paying us for access to the innovations they had hoped to acquire or replicate. But the most satisfying development came from an unexpected source. Victoria Sterling called 6 months after the licensing agreements were finalized, her voice carrying a warmth that had been absent during our previous conversations. "Maya, I wanted to congratulate you on everything you've accomplished. The industry recognition and financial success speak for themselves, but I'm particularly impressed by how you've handled the competitive challenges." "Thank you, Victoria. That means a lot, coming from you." "I owe you an apology for how I handled the situation with the investor presentation. I was threatened by your innovations and tried to control something that wasn't mine to control. You deserved better leadership support, and I'm sorry for not providing it." Her apology was unexpected but deeply appreciated. We both learned from that experience. You built something significant at Meridian Solutions, and I hope I've been able to honor that foundation while growing it in new directions. You've exceeded anything I could have imagined. The company you've built is remarkable, and the way you've handled success shows the kind of character that makes for lasting leadership. Victoria's words provided a sense of closure that I hadn't realized I needed. Our professional relationship had ended badly, but time and success had allowed both of us to appreciate the complexity of leadership transitions and the importance of recognizing everyone's contributions to collective achievements. 1 year after becoming CEO, I stood before our expanded team of 35 employees in our new headquarters, a modern office space that reflected both our growth and our commitment to creating an environment where innovation could flourish. The contrast with the small, cramped offices where we had started was dramatic, but more important was the transformation in organizational culture and strategic vision. When I became CEO 12 months ago, I addressed the team. Our goal was to build on the foundation we had established while pushing the boundaries of what was possible in consulting services.
Today, we're not just meeting those goals, we're redefining what clients expect from strategic consulting partnerships. The metrics spoke for themselves. Our client base had grown from 12 companies to 47, our revenue had increased by 340%, and our innovations had been recognized with industry awards and academic citations. But beyond the numbers, we had created something more significant, a company culture that valued both individual contributions and collective success, where innovations were properly attributed and strategic thinking was rewarded with opportunity and authority. The recognition came from multiple sources. Harvard Business Review published a case study on our technological innovations and rapid growth trajectory. Industry associations invited me to speak at conferences about leadership transitions and competitive strategy. Most meaningfully, our clients consistently rated us as their most valuable consultant partner, with retention rates that validated the algorithmic approaches we had developed. But success brought new challenges and responsibilities. As our reputation grew, we attracted attention from larger consulting firms interested in acquisition, private equity groups looking for high-growth investments, and individual clients seeking to recruit our key personnel for internal positions. Each opportunity required careful evaluation to ensure that we maintained the independence and strategic focus that had driven our success. The acquisition offers were particularly interesting. 3 different consulting conglomerates approached us with valuations that exceeded our highest projections, offering immediate liquidity and the resources of much larger organizations. But each proposal involved integration into existing corporate structures that would limit our innovation autonomy and potentially dilute the company culture we had worked to create. The question isn't whether these offers represent financial opportunities, I explained to our board, which now included 2 external directors with expertise in strategic planning and technology development. The question is whether accepting acquisition serves our long-term vision for growth and innovation. After extensive discussion, we decided to maintain our independence while selectively pursuing partnerships that enhanced our capabilities without compromising our strategic autonomy. The licensing arrangements with larger firms provided revenue growth without operational integration, and our expanding client relationships offered sustainable growth that didn't require external capital or corporate restructuring. 18 months into my tenure as CEO, the ultimate validation came from an unexpected source. Michael Harrison from Blackstone Ventures called to discuss their portfolio review and our performance relative to their investment projections. Maya, I wanted to personally congratulate you on exceeding every metric we established when we made our initial investment. Your growth trajectory has been remarkable, and your strategic leadership has validated our confidence in your vision. Thank you, Michael. The Blackstone partnership has been instrumental in providing both resources and strategic guidance. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Based on your performance and market position, we'd like to discuss increasing our investment to support your expansion into national markets. We believe Meridian Solutions is positioned to become the dominant consulting firm in your technology segment. The expansion opportunity represented everything I had envisioned when I first began developing my innovations. With Blackstone's continued backing, we could scale our technologies and service offerings to reach clients throughout the country, potentially transforming not just our company, but the entire consulting industry's approach to client relationship management. I'm very interested in discussing expansion possibilities, I replied. What kind of timeline and investment level are you considering? We're prepared to provide $15 million in additional funding to support national expansion, technology development, and strategic acquisitions that align with your growth vision. The goal would be to establish Meridian Solutions as the industry leader in innovative consulting services within 3 years. The conversation continued for over an hour as we discussed market opportunities, competitive positioning, and the operational challenges of rapid expansion. But throughout the discussion, I was struck by how completely my professional circumstances had transformed since that disastrous presentation when Victoria had undermined my innovations. 2 years earlier, I had been a talented but under-recognized employee struggling for acknowledgement within a small consulting firm. Today, I was leading strategic discussions with one of the most influential investment firms in the country, planning expansion that could reshape an entire industry. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and it hadn't been without challenges. Legal battles, competitive threats, and the complex responsibilities of leadership had tested my capabilities and resolve in ways I couldn't have anticipated. But each challenge had also provided opportunities to demonstrate the strategic thinking and innovative approaches that had originally attracted Blackstone's attention. As I prepared for the next phase of expansion, I reflected on the lessons I had learned about recognition, opportunity, and the importance of maintaining focus on value creation rather than organizational politics. Victoria's attempt to take credit for my work had backfired spectacularly, but more importantly, it had forced me to recognize my own worth and pursue opportunities that matched my capabilities and ambitions. The expansion plans we developed over the following months were comprehensive and ambitious. We would establish regional offices in 5 major markets, hire specialized teams for different industry sectors, and develop additional technological innovations that would further differentiate our service offerings. The investment from Blackstone would fund this growth while maintaining our operational independence and strategic flexibility. But perhaps the most satisfying aspect of our expansion was the opportunity to provide career advancement for the team members who had supported our growth from the beginning. Jennifer Park would become Regional Director for the West Coast expansion, David Kim would lead our new Technology Innovation Division, and several other colleagues would assume leadership roles in our expanded organization. The success we've achieved belongs to everyone who contributed to building this company, I told our team during the expansion announcement meeting. As we grow, our commitment is to ensure that individual contributions are recognized and that advancement opportunities reflect the value that each person brings to our collective success. The response was enthusiastic, with team members expressing excitement about both the professional opportunities and the validation that our strategic approach was attracting national attention. More than that, I could see that we had created something rare in the consulting industry, a company culture where innovation was genuinely valued and where individual excellence contributes to collective achievement rather than being subsumed by organizational politics. 3 months into our national expansion, I received a call that brought the story full circle in the most unexpected way. The voice belonged to Lisa Martinez, the employee who had received the promotion I had expected during that painful dinner celebration over 2 years earlier. Maya, I hope you remember me. I wanted to reach out because I've been following your success, and I'm hoping you might consider an opportunity to discuss a position with your expanding organization. I remembered Lisa clearly, not just from the promotion announcement, but from the subsequent months when she had struggled to fulfill the responsibilities that Victoria had given her. According to my former colleagues who had remained in contact, Lisa had eventually left Meridian Solutions after it became clear that she lacked the experience and strategic thinking necessary for senior management. Of course I remember you, Lisa. What kind of position are you interested in? I've been working at a smaller consulting firm since leaving Meridian, and I've gained experience in client relationship management and project coordination. I know that your company values innovation and strategic thinking, and I believe I could contribute to your continued growth. The irony of the situation was almost overwhelming. 2 years earlier, Lisa had been promoted over me despite having significantly less experience and expertise. Now she was asking me, as CEO of a rapidly expanding company, to consider her for a position in the organization I was leading. Lisa, I appreciate your interest in joining our team.
Send me your resume and a detailed cover letter explaining how your experience aligns with our current needs, and we'll review your application through our standard process. Thank you, Maya.
I want you to know that I've always recognized the quality of your work, and I understand that the promotion situation was complicated. I hope we can move forward professionally. Her acknowledgement was gracious, and I appreciated her directness in addressing the awkward history between us. But more than that, her call represented the complete transformation of power dynamics that had occurred since I took leadership of the company. The interview process with Lisa was thorough and professional, conducted by our HR team and department managers according to the standardized procedures we had established for all hiring decisions. Her qualifications were adequate for several mid-level positions, and her experience since leaving Meridian Solutions had provided her with practical skills that could be valuable in our expanding organization. Ultimately, we offered Lisa a position as a project coordinator in our new Denver office, a role that matched her experience level and provided opportunities for advancement based on performance. She accepted gratefully, and her integration into our team was smooth and professional. Maya, she said during her onboarding process, I want to thank you for considering my application fairly, despite our history. I'm committed to contributing to the success of what you've built here. Everyone deserves the opportunity to grow and contribute based on their current capabilities, I replied. What matters now is how we work together to serve our clients and advance our strategic objectives. Lisa's hiring represented more than just adding a qualified team member to our staff. It demonstrated that the company culture we had created was based on merit and contribution rather than personal relationships or past grievances. We were building something larger than individual personalities or organizational politics, focused on delivering value to clients while providing meaningful opportunities for professional growth. As our second year of expansion concluded, the metrics continued to validate our strategic approach. Revenue had grown to over $30 million annually, our client satisfaction ratings remained above 95%, and our innovations continued to attract attention from both competitors and academic researchers studying organizational effectiveness. The recognition came from multiple sources, but the most meaningful acknowledgement arrived in the form of an invitation to speak at the International Conference on Consulting Innovation, where I would present our technological approaches and organizational strategies to industry leaders from around the world. Maya Chen's transformation of Meridian Solutions represents a case study in how individual innovation can drive organizational success when properly supported and strategically implemented, read the conference introduction. Her algorithmic approaches to client retention and operational efficiency have redefined industry standards while creating sustainable competitive advantages. Standing before an audience of over 1,000 consulting professionals, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment of industry recognition. 2.5 years earlier, I had been sitting in a restaurant watching my contributions be minimized and my expertise dismissed by someone who had fundamentally misunderstood the value I brought to our organization. Innovation requires both technical expertise and organizational support, I told the audience. Individual brilliance means nothing without the authority and resources to implement strategic vision. The most important lesson I've learned is that recognition must be earned through results, but it must also be actively pursued when those results are being attributed to others. The presentation was well received, generating discussions about intellectual property protection, leadership transition strategies, and the importance of creating organizational cultures that properly value individual contributions. But beyond the professional recognition, the conference represented personal validation that the decisions I had made were not just financially successful, but strategically sound and ethically justified. 6 months later, I received the call that would mark the next phase of our evolution as a company. McKinsey & Company, the most prestigious consulting firm in the world, was inviting Meridian Solutions to participate in a strategic partnership that would provide access to their global client network while maintaining our operational independence. Ms. Chen, said Patricia Williams, a senior partner at McKinsey, your innovations in client retention technology and organizational efficiency have attracted attention at the highest levels of our firm. We believe there are opportunities for collaboration that would benefit both organizations while advancing the consulting industry as a whole. The partnership discussions that followed were complex and comprehensive, involving legal teams, strategic planners, and senior leadership from both organizations. McKinsey was interested in licensing our technological innovations for use with their enterprise clients while providing us with access to international markets and strategic resources that would accelerate our global expansion.
This partnership represents validation at the highest level of the consulting profession, I explained to our board during the final approval discussions. McKinsey's recognition of our innovations and strategic value confirms that we've created something genuinely transformative. The partnership agreement, when finalized, provided Meridian Solutions with immediate access to multinational corporations seeking innovative consulting services, while generating licensing revenue that exceeded our traditional client services income. More importantly, it established our company as a recognized leader in consulting innovation, with credibility and market position that would support continued growth and expansion. 3 years after becoming CEO, I stood in our new international headquarters, overlooking a panoramic view of the city where my journey had begun. The office space was modern and sophisticated, reflecting both our financial success and our commitment to creating an environment where innovation could flourish. But more significant than the physical transformation was the organizational culture we had built, where individual excellence was properly recognized and strategic thinking was rewarded with opportunity and authority. The team had grown to over 100 employees across 7 offices, with specialists in technology development, client relationship management, strategic planning, and operational efficiency. Each hire had been carefully selected to maintain our culture of innovation while bringing new perspectives and capabilities that enhanced our collective effectiveness. The financial metrics were impressive by any standard. Annual revenue exceeded $50 million, profit margins remained above industry averages, and our client retention rates validated the technological approaches we had pioneered. But beyond the numbers, we had created something more lasting, a company that demonstrated how individual innovation can drive organizational success when properly supported and strategically implemented. The ultimate recognition came in the form of an acquisition offer from Deloitte, one of the largest consulting firms in the world, proposing a valuation that would make Meridian Solutions one of the most successful consulting firm sales in recent history. The offer included provisions for maintaining our operational independence, continuing our innovation initiatives, and providing career advancement opportunities for our entire team. "Maya," said James Peterson, a managing director at Deloitte, "your transformation of Meridian Solutions represents exactly the kind of innovation leadership we want to support and scale globally. This acquisition would provide resources for international expansion while maintaining the strategic autonomy that has driven your success." The decision to accept or decline the acquisition offer required careful consideration of our long-term vision, the interests of our team members, and the potential for continued innovation within a larger organizational structure. After extensive discussions with our board, senior leadership, and key stakeholders, we decided to accept the offer, recognizing that Deloitte's global resources would enable us to implement our innovations on a scale that wouldn't be possible as an independent firm. The acquisition process was completed 6 months later, with terms that preserved our company culture, maintained our innovation focus, and provided substantial financial returns for everyone who had contributed to our growth. More importantly, the transaction established Meridian Solutions as the innovation division of one of the world's largest consulting firms, with authority to develop and implement new approaches that could transform how professional services are delivered globally. On the day the acquisition was finalized, I received a congratulatory call from Victoria Sterling, whose own consulting practice had grown successfully over the years since her departure from our company. "Maya, I wanted to personally congratulate you on this remarkable achievement. The success you've built validates everything I believed about your potential, even when I didn't handle our working relationship as well as I should have. Thank you, Victoria. Your initial belief in my capabilities provided the foundation for everything that followed, even when our paths diverged. You've built something extraordinary, and you've done it with integrity and strategic vision. I'm proud to have been part of your professional development, and I'm grateful that you've achieved the recognition you deserved." Her words provided a fitting conclusion to a journey that had begun with professional disappointment and evolved into industry recognition, financial success, and personal satisfaction. The transformation from undervalued employee to industry leader required strategic thinking, persistent effort, and the courage to pursue opportunities that matched my capabilities and ambitions.
But perhaps the most important lesson from the entire experience was the recognition that individual worth isn't determined by organizational politics or management decisions. Excellence speaks for itself when given the opportunity, and the most effective response to being undervalued isn't resentment or revenge, but the strategic pursuit of environments where contributions are properly recognized and rewarded. Standing in my office on that final day as an independent CEO, looking out at the city where my career had been transformed, I felt a profound sense of completion and anticipation. The journey from marginalized employee to industry leader had been challenging and complex, but it had also been deeply satisfying in ways that went beyond financial success or professional recognition. The story that had begun with a sabotaged presentation and a moment of devastating professional betrayal had evolved into something much larger, a demonstration that innovation, persistence, and strategic thinking could overcome any obstacle and create opportunities that exceeded the highest expectations. Most importantly, it had shown that the best response to being underestimated wasn't anger or resentment, but the quiet satisfaction of building something remarkable and watching the world recognize its value. The future held new challenges and opportunities as part of Deloitte's global organization, but the foundation had been established. We had proven that individual excellence could drive organizational transformation when properly supported, that innovation could create lasting competitive advantages, and that strategic leadership could build something meaningful and enduring. As I prepared to transition from independent CEO to global innovation director, I reflected on the words that had started this entire journey. The dismissive comment about taking notes from someone with 3 months of experience. Those words had stung at the time, but they had also provided the motivation to demonstrate exactly what I was capable of achieving when given the authority and resources to implement my vision fully. In the end, the greatest victory wasn't financial or professional, but personal. The recognition that I had trusted my own judgment, pursued opportunities that matched my ambitions, and built something that would continue creating value long after the specific circumstances of its creation had been forgotten. The presentation that had been sabotaged had led directly to opportunities that exceeded anything I could have imagined, proving that sometimes the worst betrayals become the catalysts for the most remarkable transformations. 5 years had passed since that devastating dinner where my world had crumbled, and today I stood before the Global Innovation Summit in Singapore, addressing an audience of 3,000 consulting professionals from 47 countries. As Deloitte's youngest ever Global Innovation Director, I was presenting the keynote on transformational leadership in the digital age. But my mind briefly wandered to that small conference room where my laptop screen had gone black and changed everything. Innovation isn't just about technology, I told the assembled leaders, my voice carrying across the massive auditorium. It's about recognizing potential, nurturing talent, and creating environments where excellence can flourish regardless of politics or personal agendas. The audience responded with engaged attention, but I could see something more in their expressions: respect, recognition, the kind of acknowledgement that comes from proven results rather than empty promises. In the 5 years since joining Deloitte, my innovations had been implemented across their global network, generating over $200 million in additional revenue, while transforming how the firm approached client relationships and operational efficiency. After the presentation, during the networking reception, I was approached by a familiar face that made me smile with genuine warmth. Jennifer Park, now CEO of her own consulting firm based in Seoul, had flown in specifically to attend my keynote. "Maya, watching you up there brought back memories of those early strategy sessions when we were just figuring out how to scale beyond 12 clients," she said, embracing me with the easy familiarity of shared struggles and mutual respect. "You've exceeded every prediction any of us could have made." "We built something special together," I replied, meaning every word. "Your leadership of the Asian expansion was instrumental in establishing our credibility in international markets." Jennifer's success had been remarkable in its own right. After leading our initial expansion efforts, she had eventually founded her own firm, specializing in cross-cultural business strategy, building on expertise developed during our rapid growth phase. Her company now employed over 60 people and served multinational corporations throughout Asia. "I wanted to thank you again for the opportunities you provided," she continued. "The confidence you showed in my capabilities changed the trajectory of my entire career. I've tried to pay that forward with my own team." Her words highlighted one of the aspects of leadership that I found most fulfilling. Creating opportunities for others to discover and develop their own potential had become as important to me as any personal achievement. The organizational culture we had built at Meridian Solutions, and later scaled at Deloitte, emphasized recognition and advancement based on contribution rather than politics or personal relationships. Later that evening, at a private dinner for keynote speakers,
I found myself seated next to Dr. Amanda Foster, Harvard Business School's Dean of Innovation Studies, who had written extensively about organizational transformation and leadership development. Miss Chen, your trajectory has become required reading in our executive leadership program, she said. The case study we've developed around Meridian Solutions illustrates several key principles about recognizing and responding to workplace dynamics that limit individual potential. What conclusions have your students reached? I asked, genuinely curious about academic perspectives on my professional journey. The most significant insight is about the difference between reactive and strategic responses to professional setbacks. Many promising leaders allow negative experiences to diminish their confidence or limit their ambitions. You demonstrated how setbacks can become catalysts for breakthrough achievements when approached with strategic thinking and persistent effort. Dr. Foster's analysis resonated with my own understanding of what had made the difference during those crucial months when everything was changing. The temptation to respond emotionally to Victoria's betrayal had been strong, but choosing strategic patience and focusing on value creation had ultimately generated opportunities that exceeded anything I could have achieved through confrontation or resentment. The other lesson our students find compelling is about intellectual property and innovation ownership. Your experience demonstrates the importance of documenting contributions and maintaining legal protections, but also shows how genuine innovation creates value that transcends any single organizational context. 3 days later, back in my office at Deloitte's New York headquarters, I received a call that brought everything full circle in the most unexpected way. The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, the former CEO of Pinnacle Consulting Group who had challenged our intellectual property rights years earlier. Maya, I'm calling because I wanted to personally apologize for the litigation strategy we pursued against Meridian Solution. It was aggressive and unnecessary, and I've since learned to better appreciate the difference between competition and attempted theft. His call was surprising, not just because of our contentious history, but Marcus had left Pinnacle 18 months earlier under circumstances that suggested significant strategic disagreements with their board. I appreciate the call, Marcus. What prompted this reflection? I'm launching a new venture focused on sustainable business consulting, and the experience of working with your innovations through our licensing agreement opened my eyes to different approaches to growth and competition. Instead of trying to acquire or undermine competitors, I'm focused on developing genuine value propositions that serve clients effectively. Marcus's transformation reminded me that professional relationships could evolve beyond their original context when both parties were willing to acknowledge mistakes and focus on future possibilities rather than past conflicts. I'd be interested in hearing about your new venture, I said, recognizing that his experience and network could potentially create collaboration opportunities that benefited both our organizations. Actually, that's part of why I'm calling. I'd like to discuss potential partnership arrangements between your innovation division and our sustainability consulting services. I believe there are market opportunities where our combined expertise could create significant value for enterprise clients.
The conversation that followed was productive and professionally focused, demonstrating how former adversaries could become collaborators when their strategic interests aligned and personal animosity was set aside in favor of business objectives. 1 month later, I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when my assistant announced a visitor who requested a few minutes of my time. Victoria Sterling stood in my doorway, looking confident and successful, carrying herself with the poise of someone who had found her own path to professional fulfillment. Maya, I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit. I was in the city for meetings and wanted to congratulate you personally on the Innovation Summit keynote. The industry recognition is well-deserved. Victoria, please come in. It's good to see you looking so well. She settled into the chair across from my desk, and I was struck by how much our dynamic had evolved since those early days when she had been my supervisor and I had been struggling for recognition within her organization. I wanted to share some news with you, she said, her expression combining excitement with a touch of nervousness. I've been offered a position as Chief Operating Officer for a Fortune 500 consulting firm, and I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to serve as a reference. The request was both surprising and gratifying. Despite the complicated history of our professional relationship, Victoria was asking me to vouch for her capabilities and character to potential employers who would undoubtedly research our shared background. Of course I'd be happy to provide a reference, I replied. Your entrepreneurial success and leadership experience speak for themselves, but I'm honored that you'd ask for my support. Maya, I need to tell you something that I should have said years ago. The presentation sabotage wasn't an accident. I deliberately interfered with your technology because I was threatened by your innovations and afraid that investor recognition would diminish my role as CEO. Her admission was unexpected, not because I hadn't suspected it, but because acknowledging deliberate sabotage required a level of honesty and vulnerability that went beyond what was necessary for our current interaction. I appreciate your honesty, Victoria. That took courage to admit. I've spent years regretting that decision, not just because it was wrong, but because it ultimately led to outcomes that benefited everyone except me. Your success, the company's growth, even the opportunities it created for other team members, all happened because I tried to suppress excellence instead of supporting it. Victoria's reflection demonstrated genuine personal growth and professional maturity that I found admirable. The woman sitting across from me had clearly learned from her mistakes and developed leadership approaches that emphasized collaboration rather than control. The past is behind us, I said. What matters now is that we've both built successful careers and learned from our experiences. I'll provide the strongest possible reference because I believe in your capabilities and your potential for continued growth. Maya, I need to tell you something that I should have said years ago. The presentation sabotage wasn't an accident. I deliberately interfered with your technology because I was threatened by your innovations and afraid that investor recognition would diminish my role as CEO. Her admission was unexpected, not because I hadn't suspected it, but because acknowledging deliberate sabotage required a level of honesty and vulnerability that went beyond what was necessary for our current interaction. I appreciate your honesty, Victoria. That took courage to admit. I've spent years regretting that decision, not just because it was wrong, but because it ultimately led to outcomes that benefited everyone except me. Your success, the company's growth, even the opportunities it created for other team members, all happened because I tried to suppress excellence instead of supporting it. Victoria's reflection demonstrated genuine personal growth and professional maturity that I found admirable. The woman sitting across from me had clearly learned from her mistakes and developed leadership approaches that emphasized collaboration rather than control. The past is behind us, I said. What matters now is that we've both built successful careers and learned from our experiences. I'll provide the strongest possible reference because I believe in your capabilities and your potential for continued growth. Our conversation continued for another 30 minutes, covering industry trends, leadership challenges, and the evolution of consulting services in an increasingly digital marketplace. By the time Victoria left my office, I felt a sense of closure and mutual respect that had been absent from our relationship for years. 6 months later, I received an invitation that represented the ultimate professional recognition. The International Business Leaders Forum was inviting me to join their board of directors, a position that would involve providing strategic guidance to emerging business leaders worldwide and contributing to policy discussions about innovation, entrepreneurship, and economic development. Ms. Chen, wrote the forum's chairman, your transformation of Meridian Solutions and subsequent leadership at Deloitte exemplifies the kind of strategic thinking and innovation that drives global economic progress. We believe your perspectives would significantly enhance our mission of supporting leadership development and business innovation worldwide. Accepting the board position would mean additional responsibilities and international travel, but it also represented an opportunity to influence business education and leadership development on a global scale. The invitation validated not just my professional achievements, but my strategic approach to building organizations that valued individual excellence while creating collective success. As I prepared my acceptance letter, I reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought me to this moment of international recognition. 7 years earlier, I had been a talented but undervalued employee, watching my contributions be minimized and my expertise dismissed by someone who fundamentally misunderstood the nature of innovation and leadership. Today, I was being invited to help shape the future of business leadership on a global stage, with opportunities to influence how organizations recognize and develop talent, protect intellectual property, and create cultures where excellence could flourish regardless of politics or personal relationships. The transformation hadn't been easy or immediate.
It had required strategic thinking, persistent effort, legal battles, competitive challenges, and the courage to pursue opportunities that matched my ambitions rather than accepting limitations imposed by others. But each obstacle had also provided opportunities to demonstrate capabilities and develop skills that ultimately created value far beyond what I could have achieved in my original position. Standing in my office that evening, looking out at the city lights and contemplating the international responsibilities I was about to undertake, I felt profound gratitude for the unexpected path my career had taken. The presentation sabotage that had seemed so devastating at the time had actually been the catalyst for opportunities that exceeded my highest aspirations. Sometimes the greatest professional victories come not from avoiding betrayal or overcoming obstacles, but from using setbacks as launching points for achievements that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. The laptop screen that went black in front of 12 investors had ultimately led to opportunities to address thousands of business leaders, develop innovations that transformed entire industries, and create organizations that properly valued individual contributions while building collective success. The future held new challenges and opportunities as a member of the International Business Leaders Forum, but the foundation had been established through years of strategic thinking, persistent innovation, and the recognition that excellence creates its own opportunities when properly developed and strategically positioned. As I turned off the lights and prepared to leave the office, I smiled at the memory of Victoria's words from so long ago about taking notes from someone with more experience. In the end, the most important lesson I had learned wasn't about technology or business strategy, but about recognizing their own worth and having the courage to pursue environments where that worth could be properly recognized and rewarded. The presentation that had been sabotaged had led directly to a keynote address at the Global Innovation Summit, proving that sometimes the most devastating setbacks become the foundation for the most remarkable transformations. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.